entitled Step Monster, who always neglected, abused, and humiliated Opie, calling her an R-word as if her dead mother had forced her pet to starve to death as punishment for stealing from her, finally kicked her out, forcing Opie to drop out with her jelly spine husband. But she still resents Opie for surviving and becoming successful in life, and now demands Opie bake a cake for her 50th birthday. So Opie exacted revenge. My stepmother was a nasty person to grow up with. She was mean, vindictive, and had an inferiority complex, which she used to criticize anyone who was doing well, particularly those who performed better than her. My father spent my childhood across the street, and my mother was in and out of inpatient facilities until she died, so she was my only available caregiver guardian. I am not going to lie and say I was perfect, but I wasn't bad. I was a good student, involved in community and school activities, and I found work as soon as I was able to. My main issue was that I frequently had a negative attitude toward her and her family, all of whom were unpleasant to be around. I've known these people since I was 4. I'm now in my late 20s, and none of them were ever supportive or kind. I wanted to go to school and become a psychologist, teacher, therapist, or veterinarian. To be honest, I think I just liked the structure the school provided and wanted to stick with it after I graduated. But as soon as I received my diploma, my stepmother handed me a notice to vacate the property. Less than a month later, I left. To be fair to him, my father attempted to intervene and prevent the eviction because it was his home, but she was the primary occupant, and we were informed by a local cop that she could remove me from the house and file trespassing charges if I returned. To this day, I believe he was full of shit but didn't want to deal with it. So I was 18, homeless, and about to start college in a few months, and I had chosen a local school over better scholarships so I could stay at home and save money on housing. I found a place with a man who became my best friend, and I attempted to attend school, but it didn't feel right anymore. Between full-time work to make ends meet and mental health issues that arose in the aftermath, I was unable to continue and dropped out. My father was unable to provide much assistance, and most of my family never wanted to intervene because she had persuaded the majority of them that I had chosen to go and see with them. She would call and boast about how difficult the real world is, make snide remarks about my dying mother while simultaneously expressing sympathy and support. If I returned home for holiday dinners, she would tell everyone that I was the first psychologist she'd ever seen working the McDonald's till, and if I defended myself, I'd be chastised for not taking the joke. It was humiliating, and after a few years, I realized I could block her and she could not do anything about it. So I did. My life did turn around. I work as a pastry chef in a bakery that I adore and would love to own someday if the owner would allow it when he retires. It's not the life I imagined for myself, but it's a good one that I share with my fiancé, and I wouldn't change it for anything. Within the past 2 years, I resumed contact with my father and, as a result, his wife. He's still a doormat and she's still a C&T, but she's no longer picking on a little girl, so I bite back. I've also been able to contact my mother's family, who had been estranged from her for decades before her death, and meet people who would have truly loved me if they had known I existed. Dad's family is kept at arm's length, but I finally have a family to talk about when my friends are making holiday plans. And that was all I ever wanted, doing what I do for a living. I always brag a little at family gatherings, and I've often made custom cakes for relatives who asked. Boundaries were established, and the first cousin who tried to push them ended up without a cake for her son's birthday. They are respected. Stepmother despises my job. She despised the fact that I was happy. Then I don't mind if I'm a little plump, that I'm engaged, and that she's not allowed to attend the wedding. She dislikes the fact that I am good at what I do, and no matter how hard she tries, the fondant will always be the only thing she can insult. Which is fair. I don't care for it either. I baked a lovely 3-tiered red velvet cake for my father's birthday party last month and provided numerous pastries and a cookie buffet. My boss is a godsend for allowing me to use his industrial kitchen for the entire day. My stepmother could only say that my cake tasted like a box mix. After 2 decades of abuse, I was finally done trying. I spent days making everything I offered free of charge, and she compared my efforts and knowledge to effing Betty Crocker. No offense to anyone who bakes, likes Betty, or uses any other box mix, But comparing fast food to your own home cooking and preferring fast food is a complete slap in the face of the hours of labor and effort, as well as the years spent honing and perfecting recipes. At the beginning of February, she asked me to bake her 50th birthday cake. There were no other details except that she did not want red velvet and that it was for 100 people. I agreed. I stocked up on Duncan Hines and canned frosting, slathered it on 40 sheet cakes the day before, and didn't bother decorating them. Stepmom was furious. I ruined her birthday, embarrassed her in front of her friends and family. How could I be so callous? Etc. I just told her that she compared my cake at Dad's party to Betty Crocker, so she must prefer simple cakes. I left soon after she began crying. She had apparently planned on Instagramming the party and expecting me to take care of my desserts as usual. Dad didn't care. He just said it would be best if I didn't see her for a while and we met somewhere other than his house. I don't want to be around her again, and I hope her family choked on that dry-ass kick. Edit. Thank you for the awards and the incredible support. You/game_boy. You blocked me quickly after being a nasty little troll in DMs, didn't you? Not man enough to publicly bully someone. And please, whoever reported me for self-harm, concern, or whatever the self-care bot was, don't worry, I'm in a great place now. Therapy was never an option, but meeting the most perfect man in the world and gaining his and other friends' support has been extremely beneficial. And while I despise my stepmother, I have no desire to harm myself or her. My life is now full of love, and the people around me are also wonderful at it. I'm overwhelmed by your encouraging and kind comments. You're all so sweet, and I wish I could hug everyone, especially those who have shared similar stories. After a while, my fiancé read the post, and we discussed how we would deal with Dad and B.I. Crocker in the future. And I think I'll ask Dad about family therapy so that the two of us can properly discuss things. Permanent. No contact with his wife is appropriate. I hope everyone has a wonderful day and that your cakes are moist and delicious. Update Betty Crocker's history. At the age of 20, I cut off communication with my stepmother and only resumed it 2 years ago for the sake of my father. Simply put, at 18, she threw me out of the house and mocked me for failing to start college on time while still working at a fast food restaurant. At 18, I was homeless, with a spineless father and a mother who had been institutionalized for endangering herself and others. At 18, Betty Crocker had irreversibly harmed my relationship with my paternal family, and I had no idea who my maternal family was. They had no idea my mother had given birth. I was a pariah. My crime was continuing to live in her home and property, and my punishment was hell. When I was 4 years old, Petty and my father got together. I got married when I was nearly 6. I've seen some old photos and recall a few vague memories. And she had been kind. Once, she brought me new toys. Watched The Little Mermaid on repeat. I got a flower girl dress that matched her wedding dress. And she was the one who taught me how to complete my chores. Dad was a long-haul trucker. It still is. And he entrusted this woman with my life. She became my primary caregiver, holding my hand when I went to daycare and kissing me when school ended, almost as soon as the ink on their marriage certificate had dried. Things have changed. My older sisters lived full-time with their mother due to Dad's schedule, and I was always cared for by either his mother or his sister. Suddenly, I only saw her family, and they made certain I was excluded. Step-cousins my age were given treats, gifts, hugs, and taken on short trips. But I was always left behind, sometimes alone for up to 4 hours in the beginning, increasing as I get older. This began at 6 o'clock. I was told that Dad's family no longer had time to see me and that I did not want to see them. My sisters eventually stopped visiting me, only coming over for a few days when Dad was home, and never contacted me on their own. I still wanted, believed, and needed her to love me. My mother was sick. That is all I understood. And my father was gone. Nobody in the world wanted me around them. No one but her. So I clung to Petty like she was a lifeline, fighting anyone who tried to divide us, to her advantage or disadvantage. She did take physical care of me, and I was taken to see my mother when she was allowed visitors. When my mother was feeling well, she would hold my hand and sit with me while we talked, or she would encourage me to be open. When Mom was quiet, I'm still not sure why. If she took the opportunity to belittle or condescend to my mother, it would make sense that she was attempting to sever our bond. This would make sense. But those visits, even as I grew older, were usually the most enjoyable times between us. I'm curious if she felt an adult sense of responsibility to Mom, or if she felt she needed to allow her time with her child. But I never asked. Petty isolated me from the people around her, and she started picking on me in front of her family. If I was having trouble with an assignment, she'd bring it and have relatives solve it. Then call me an R-word just like my mother. If I wanted to play a sport, I had to be the best on the team, or risk being cut because it was a waste of time. Anything artistic was discouraged, and she frequently used clever tactics to discourage me from pursuing an emotional outlet, such as music or painting. If I succeeded in a pursuit, it was due to her, and I was expected to honor her in some way. As a child, I was always taking on extra chores or gifting her something for my birthday, which my father would send. But money was another issue. He would give her money to buy me gifts, but she would simply put it in an account for me. However, I was never allowed to touch it. I had to pay for anything I broke or mishandled, and I had to buy gifts for her on her birthday, Mother's Day, Christmas, and her anniversary. Of course, anytime I succeeded, I didn't get a gift unless Dad physically handed it to me. He eventually caught on and began to give me actual physical presents, but this was several years later. And if she liked the gift, I was told to give it to her to keep the peace. I wasn't allowed pats, and the only time I asked, I was told to get a fish. Remember the rule about not touching money? She bought the fish and set it up, but when the food ran out, I was not allowed to buy any more. I watched as my goldfish died. I never asked for anything more. To this day, I am afraid to get another pet. Earning her love and approval became my primary focus until I was about 14 and realized how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I developed an attitude and was clearly hostile to her family. My paternal family rarely saw me and seemed to know what I was up to or in trouble for, but they knew nothing else about me. Hobbies, interests, grades, aspirations. When she rewarded me for something rare, it was as if everyone saw nothing but a pimply F-up. She was nearly excessive. Clothes, jewelry, makeup, shopping, trips that would make most teenagers envious. But it was not quality time. It wasn't tailored for me. Everything she liked was taken away at some point. Dad allowed it. He believed the stories about his mean, lazy daughter who was constantly ungrateful. I was always in trouble when he came home, and by the time I was almost an adult, I wished he would stay away. He eventually caught on to a few lies and apologized. But how do you get back from that? I told him I wished he and his mother were in different places, where he was ill and I only saw him, and she was healthy because she loved me even when she didn't know me. I meant it at the time, but I have since apologized for my words. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It must be hell to be trapped in your own mind. Only in fleeting moments do we become aware of the present. Petty never left me alone. I would go everywhere with her forever, her shadow. I wasn't allowed to stay with friends and they weren't allowed to visit. Or rather, they were. But only if I fulfilled an impossible requirement. Things like getting over 100 in a class with little to no extra credit or keeping the yard immaculate. Within hours of her family's arrival in 18 years, I was allowed one slumber party that ended before 730 that night because Petty thought my friend was rude for not completely cleaning her plate at the table. She informed my friend's parents that she was being a brat and was no longer welcome in our home. My friend never spoke with me again. After being grounded from a week-long camp she was planning to attend, mealtime was horrendous. Petty serves massive portions to customers, and if you eat them all, you're a fat pig. But you do get more. If you don't, you're an ungrateful cow, and this will be your only meal option until it's gone. I despise black-eyed peas, and she made a huge pot of them every month, expecting me to eat the majority of them. I wouldn't let it go to waste, so I ate sandwiches and hoped she got the point. She locked the cabinets after that, and I was humiliated at another family dinner when she served me black-eyed peas, while everyone else ate one of my favorite dishes. God damn, it was on you. That may not sound so bad, but after 10 years, seeing this woman you inexplicably adore look smug while singling you out will break your heart. Abusers like her do not need to physically punish their victims or lock them up in broom closets like Disney villains. You rely on them to love you. Their acceptance becomes your main focus. I effectively imprisoned myself because all I desired was this woman's attention, approval, and praise. I hoped she would love me as much as my sisters did. Mom loved them and treats me the same way she does them. It made no difference to the rest of the family whether she gave me the time of day. My father's neglect was mitigated if she told him he was being too harsh on me when he was home. The visits to see Mom were special because she was gentle and kind, just as she had been when I was a child. She threw me away as soon as she could, and like a broken dog, I crawled back on my belly, hoping to win her over again. I jumped if she said so. I was compliant and polite, no matter how or by whom I was treated. I defended her when her father became enraged and spiteful. I cried when she mocked me for working 2 jobs to get by, and I considered permanent solutions when she called me a failure and a waste of space for attending a community college instead of my intended university. My fiancé's aunt changed that for me. My friends described her as horrendous and abusive, but his aunt, who managed the convenience store where I worked, overheard her conversation with me and chased her away, threatening her if she returned. And then she gave me a hug. I was so desperate for love and touch that I burst into tears right away. She did not send me home. She walked me to her car and took me to a diner. The burger was overly greasy, overloaded with mustard, and most likely the definition of heart disease. But it'll always be one of my favorite meals. Tears. All of her. She didn't give me any wise advice, didn't immediately adopt me, or let me join her family. It was a simple act of kindness and human empathy that I had been missing out on without even realizing it. And that was all I ever wanted or needed. She introduced me to her nephew, my fiancé, and we immediately clicked. We had very different upbringings, but he was so cheerful and bright that I fell in love. And now I'm on the verge of turning 30, hopefully for good. No contact with Petty Crocker, the cake hater and bee of the year. I'm not sure why she treated me that way, or why her family hated me. I'm not sure why she felt more empathy for my mother, a broken woman who she only saw at her worst. She raised a child. I know it's behind me, and the people I've surrounded myself with all support me for who I am, not what they want me to be. I'm not sure how to end this, and to be honest, I'm not sure I can answer many of the questions. Writing this has been cathartic, but there is so much left unsaid, because how do you write about a broken child who never had the opportunity to mature? I'm happy right now. I am happier than I have ever been, and I am completely out of the dark. Nothing she ever said was true, and I can't imagine a better life than the one I have now. The trauma is real. I do not need a therapist to recognize that I am damaged, but scars fade, and I hope that now that the wounds have closed, the fading will begin.